What's it going to take to lead Huntsville's top industries into the future? Join me as I chat with leaders in our city about workplace culture, attracting top talent, and maintaining a competitive edge. I'm James Lomax, and this is Uncommon Access. Today, we're talking with Clayton Hinchman, Chairman and CEO of Ignite, about how to develop workplace culture and build a successful team within an organization. Clayton Hinchman, welcome to Uncommon Access. Thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, James.
So I knew we wanted to get you on the podcast for multiple reasons. Your company is now a tenant with Corporate Office Properties Trust. We're very happy to have you as a customer. But more than that, I know that you have a very unique story, a unique background, one that people will be interested in. And then obviously your business has become somewhat of a mainstay here in the area. Can you just give the listeners a little bit of your background on who you are, how you came to be?
I'm a Libra. No. I'm originally a West Point grad. I'm originally from South Texas. Served in the Army, 10th Mountain Division. I served on a Special Operations Task Force 1-7, used to hunt Al-Qaeda many years ago. Stepped on a bomb, lost a leg, and then went back to school and did a few other things in between and started a company, but bought a house online. Moved to Huntsville, Alabama about 11 years ago, and it's been just a lot of fun meeting great people and having fun ever since we've been here. So
there's definitely a couple of items to unpack there. So let's try to go back a little bit earlier. So what made you want to go to West Point?
It was a challenge, man. I mean, that was the biggest thing. I realized as a young person that I needed challenges, and I guess I was kind of a wayward spirit. I don't know the best way to put that, a wild child. And, West Point had this structure, and it had this thing, and it was a big scholarship, and you had to earn it. And I knew that, it's going to be difficult to get in. It's going to be difficult to make it through. And I just wanted to see, what was I made of? And that's how I ended up, applying to West Point, was lucky enough to get accepted, and then, went through in 4 years. That was pretty much it.
So you've been doing a little series I've noticed on like your LinkedIn page of where you're kind of giving people your thoughts on career success, on challenges. And I guess that parlays in a little bit about what you said about West Point and afterwards serving as an Army Ranger. Is serving as an Army Ranger, just for the people that may not know, a lot of them will, but is that something that just comes from being a West Point grad, or was that something you consciously chose to go do?
Yeah, no. So I graduated West Point 2005. I picked 10th Mountain Division right out of West Point because I was in New York City 2 days before the towers came down, and I wanted to serve in Afghanistan with 10th Mountain. The Army ended up changing my orders. When I got to 10th Mountain, I ended up serving in Iraq. But no, I chose infantry. I chose 10th Mountain. When you become an infantry officer, they give you an airborne class. They give you a Ranger School class. And that was always something that I wanted to do early on. I realized sleeping in the woods, being dirty, being hungry, I never had a problem with it. I don't want to say I thrived in it, but there's a lot of us that we were just made that way. And I really enjoyed it. And then I was lucky enough, I was the Ranger School honor graduate, and I thought, hey, I finally found something. My GPA at West Point wasn't that high, right? My military and physical was okay. My academic was not good. And I was the honor grad at Ranger School, and I said, oh, well, hell, I finally found something I'm good at.
So is that kind of like being the valedictorian then of your class?
Yeah, I'm going to mess this up, man. That's a long time ago. But there was an enlisted graduate, honor graduate. There was an officer honor graduate. I was the officer honor graduate. And I can't remember. I think there were 3 total honor graduates in each class. Somebody's going to correct me, but I messed that up. But I was one of the honor graduates, but I was the officer honor graduate.
Very cool. Very cool. So you went on, you did that, and you were injured in combat, obviously.
Yep.
Take the listeners a little bit through just some of the emotions that are shared in something like that.
Pain. No.
Yeah, well.
to quote Ivan Drago, what that is? No. So, I was on a task force that we would pull night raids to go find known Al-Qaeda operatives in Iraq at the time. I was what was called a fob hopper. We would move different forward operating bases and hop to a direct action targeted hit. And I had a bunch of great enlisted men and non-commissioned officers. And, they took it really hard that I got wounded. 15 men walked over the IED that I stepped on. 15. And they had actually rolled concertina wire over it. But it was a pressure wire IED, which is basically thin copper wire that they make a closed circuit system. They spray paint it. You can't see it, right? It's very difficult to pick up. And it was 1:30 in the morning. We'd had a hard landing in the back of a Chinook. Some of my guys were injured. So I was just walking, talking to the birds overhead with my radio operator, and I stepped on a pressure wire IED. And the emotions you feel, you feel a lot, right? I was awake the entire time. My guys were keeping me awake, trying to get rocks out of my eyes. I think I took 2 or 3 shots of morphine, and you just feel a tremendous amount of pain, and you want it to end. And you say a lot of crazy stuff because you want to die. You don't want to be there. Your people keep you alive. I had a tourniquet on both legs. My right leg was already gone. My left leg was hurt pretty bad. And my guys kept me alive. I didn't bleed out. It was at least an hour and a half before the bird could get to us, medevac. And then I was on a Black Hawk for another hour, I think, before I got to Baghdad. And they finally put me under and, started trying to clean me up. But every emotion you can think of, man, when you step on an IED, it really goes through. You're thankful that you're there. You regret a lot. But at the same time, I mean, I had great soldiers, and they saved my life, so I can't. I have no regrets, though. I had a great time in the Army. I loved it. It ended abruptly, but I made lifelong friends. And really losing my leg has given me a career that I never thought I'd have. I'd probably still be in the Army running and gunning if I could. And luckily now I'm here as the chairman and CEO of Ignite and getting to run a great team. And it's a lot of fun. I never thought I would have employees that talk to astronauts.
Right.
And that's what we have today. So it's a lot of fun, man. No regrets for me.
That is incredible. And so you went through a lot there, obviously. What about that step between? So how did you regain your composure after going through something like that? And then how did you channel that energy into what you do now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to process. I had 35 surgeries.
You went back to school.
Yeah, I had 35 surgeries. It took me a year and a half to medically retire just from the whole Walter Reed, thing that you had to go through with a medical review and all the other stuff. But I started going to Georgetown at night because the Army wouldn't let me work. I had gotten an internship with Senator, I cannot remember off the top of my head, but forgive me. But they wouldn't let me do it for some reason at Walter Reed. I don't know why. And so I went to Georgetown to get my master's in policy at night, and finally was able to medically retire and started working as a defense contractor in D.C. And then I just became arrogant enough to think I could, I guess, run my own business eventually, and that's how it led me to what we do today.
So you started a business, I think it was USI.
Yep.
Take us through. So you ended up actually selling that business.
Yeah, I did. So I worked on Capitol Hill a little bit, finished school, did some stuff, defense contracting, and started my own business. It was called USI. And I got 2 small contracts and bought a house online, moved to Huntsville 11 years ago. Had only been here a couple times, but knew a lot of people and knew that there was something here that we could do. My wife's from Georgia. I'm from Texas. We didn't want to raise our kids in D.C. I had a 6-month-old daughter, and my wife didn't want to, being from Georgia, she didn't want to move to Alabama at first, right?
So did you just kind of pick it on a map, or was it, hey, this is a great place for government contracting?
No, it was purely a financial decision.
Right.
You look at the cost of living 10 years ago, 12 years ago, compared to income, the revenue stream, the connections you had. I'm not a retired general, so I can't just walk the halls of the Pentagon and, lobby for money. And I knew it was going to take long-term strategic relationships to build. And I knew Huntsville was the place. I'd been here a couple times. I knew some people. I knew how entrepreneurial the city was. I knew how welcoming the people were here. And, we still mentor companies that want to grow and thrive here, even big business that want to invest in our backyard. We tell them, like, the economy here, the people are welcome to you, but you have to be a member of the community, right? You can't just parachute in. And you might be successful a couple times, but you have to be a member of this community because it's a very close-knit network. I mean, you know that. It's all relationship-based. And if people don't trust you and if they don't know you, they're not going to work with you, right? And you could have the greatest product in the world, but if they don't know you and they don't have any trust with you and your company or your teammates, they're probably not going to buy your services, right? So,
One of the things I really like about some of the things you write on LinkedIn and other places is you give practical advice. So like what would be some of the practical applications of getting to know the community? I mean, how would someone new here, someone that wants to deepen their relationships to the business community, how would they do that?
Yeah. So first of all, you mentioned the social media post that I'm trying to do. I don't think I'm the best writer, but my employees told me, we had an offsite in January, and they said, Clay, you're the face of Ignite. Right, which I am. I'm the majority owner. We are a partial employee-owned business, right? So I am beholden to my stockholders. They get a stock value every year. But they said, we want more of your leadership, right? We want you to go out and you do speaking engagements, but continue to try to do more of that. So I'm forcing myself to write more articles and to try to do a better job. But ask for you make a relationship. I know you. If I wanted to grow in our relationship or in our business line. And I even mentor my young teammates this way and say, look, go to a lunch with a person and say, hey, look, I'm trying to grow my network. Can you introduce me to 2 or 3 people that you think would be beneficial that I would talk to and I can pick their brains? If it's from contracts, from business development, from operations, management, engineering, technical, just ask people. And if you're not a turd, right? If you show up being respectful, being on time, right? Being clean, right? I mean, it's kind of funny, but I'm being serious. Is if you are respectful of other people's time and courtesy of their time, having an agenda, and you want to cover these topics and learn from them, there's so many great entrepreneurs, especially in Huntsville, who will give you their time freely. Right. Maybe you got to buy them a lunch or something, right? But not even then, they'll probably buy your lunch. But they want to give their knowledge down. Really strong, in my opinion, entrepreneurs are people that want to leave a lasting legacy, right? They want to provide some of their knowledge. They want to give practical advice to other people and say, hey, look, this is what I know. No pun intended. This is the bomb. This is the bomb you shouldn't step on, right? But literally, I've made so many mistakes as a business person that I try to tell people things of what they shouldn't do because I've done so many stupid things. Right. And I'm like, don't waste that $10,000, right? Reinvest that over here. Hey, do it yourself. But I'm going to give you my blunt force feedback on what I think is the best thing. But just asking people for their relationships, I think, can go a really long way in a relationship-based business, which is most of our businesses. It really
so
is.
Take the initiative, make the ask, bounce ideas off of them, and utilize their connections. Some good advice there. So you mentioned you moved back here you moved here initially about 11 years ago. Since then, how do you think Huntsville's changed?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is extreme growth. Right. I think that, many years ago, we did not invest in infrastructure because we didn't, right? The old saying, if you build it, they'll come. Well, the thought was if we don't build it, they won't come. Well, Alabama as a state has been a leader, right, for many years. And Huntsville has obviously benefited from that. And so people are going to come here. People are moving to great, decent cost of living, low taxes, right? Entrepreneurial environments, ecosystems that they can thrive in. And so I've seen the ecosystem just get stronger and stronger and stronger in just the decade I've lived here. I mean, long-term, Alabamians, they know a lot more than I do, right? But I've just seen in one decade how that tremendous investment has continued to just grow and grow and grow. My concern is that the infrastructure investment doesn't live up to the same standard as the housing market, right? So you keep building offices and houses, but you don't have the infrastructure in place.
The roads, the schools,
right, all of that, right? So, I live in Madison now, but Madison City Schools, I think, was trying to get developers to not develop so fast because they didn't have the school systems to support, the children. So there's a lot of good things with the entrepreneurial ecosystem, but you have to build that relationship with policymakers, right, and everybody else who's going to benefit from the potential tax revenue dollars, right? And so those are my major concerns, but I think we've got a lot of great leadership that are tackling those issues from the Alabama House to the governor and a lot of other congressional delegation that's helping lead that. But I mentioned earlier about the services market and changing that to doing more higher technical manufacturing. I think you're going to see more additive manufacturing. You're going to see materials analysis in North Alabama. Not saying that Ignite can do some of that, but we can. But you're seeing
shameless plug,
right? You're seeing more of that in our ecosystem, not just butts and seats, right? That's what we call it, butts and seats contractors. You're seeing people develop great things. You're seeing high bays, right? out in Research Park where people are building
inventing
stuff, right? And I think that you're going to see more and more of that. You're also going to see more on the biomedical field that's going to come out of the Huntsville area that I don't think we have. We've just the tip of the iceberg with some of the biomedical stuff that Huntsville's doing as a leader in the world, not just the nation.
Yeah, I'm always interested. I mean, you look at Hudson Alpha, it kind of seems like it just started as a little small idea, and you go out there now, and they have their own campus. You have, I don't know how many, multiple companies out there.
Yeah, but Hudson Alpha, I mean, as you know, is now investing near, Auburn,
right,
Montgomery, all of these other places. They're investing in the rest.
They're in agriculture. They just opened a new greenhouse, and so I think when people, when they think of Huntsville, they think of how it may have been 11 years ago, a federally contracted town. I think that's changing a little bit. I mean, you have the Polarises and the Toyotas that help diversify the economy. They add new challenges to the economy, right? I mean, you got to be able to figure out, if somebody goes and gets a $50,000 a year job at Toyota and was previously a waitress, well, then who becomes the waitress now? So the service industry is starting to struggle. Yeah. But I think all those things combined help create a good area to live to where, companies like you can thrive. Yep. One of your favorite topics, I'm sure. So you're the chairman, you're the CEO of Ignite. Give the listeners a little idea what Ignite is, what you do each and every day.
Yeah, so we are primarily a software development shop. We support the Air Force, the Army, NASA, but we're now growing in the intelligence community, and so we're growing past just software development into advisory services. And what I mean by that is senior level subject matter experts who are supporting Space Force, Space Command, now with the FBI. In the past 6 months, we've earned 4 new contracts with the FBI, the intelligence community, as well as the Army and others. And some of those we don't have a ton of revenue on, but it's new customer bases for us to generate new relationships. But that's primarily what we do as a software engineering and an engineering technical services firm.
So as far as the landscape of Huntsville, if someone was interested in starting a similar type business, would you say that Huntsville's the best place in America to do it?
I don't think there's any place better to start a federal services-based business than Huntsville, Alabama, and really North Alabama, not just Huntsville, North Alabama. And I would caveat that by saying I think that, we live in the technology valley, right? I've been trying to coin that term for a while now, right?
I like it. Yeah, but I'll use it.
The technology valley, there's so many smart people here. I think one of the things we lack is private equity firms or even other non-traditional bankers that want to invest in some of these smart engineers that are building things in their garages still. They're still doing it, and they don't have access.
Less collateral-based loans.
Yeah, collateral-based loans. Yeah, exactly. And they don't have access to some of the investment funds that you get in some of the other locations, right, where people are looking for that quick turn on a dollar. But they're building great directed energy lasers and all these other crazy things that they're doing because you've got super smart people, right? They may not know exactly how to run a business, but they know how to build something. So I think there's a lot more opportunity for North Alabama that we're going to see over the next 10 years with more entrepreneurs popping up. And I don't think there's a better place to do it than right here in our backyard.
So on the podcast, we've talked to some other entrepreneurs, other owners of government contracting businesses or leaders. One of the things that seems like it keeps coming up as a challenge is recruiting and retaining talent. And maybe that's just the day and age we live in, but would you say that that's top of mind in your business?
Yeah, I think Ignite does not have a retention problem per se across the industry standard because we're an employee-owned business, right? So our employees, when they get their stock valuation and we're doing our jobs, they believe in it. We have employees right now that are being offered jobs at big businesses, and they turn them down because they're like, hey, I'm vested over here in Ignite, and my stock value went up. I'm not leaving. Like, we know that word of mouth, right? So our retention is not as bad across the industry as potentially some others are, but recruiting is a problem, right? And I think that you're seeing that's a global problem potentially. I'm not that smart, but recruiting is a problem because of the remote work, because of some large businesses that will pay more, right? But they're going to work that person 90 hours a week, right? And so I think we'll see how the future goes, but we do see some of that with recruiting just from unrealistic salary requests from employees that have maybe 2 to 4 years of experience, and they're looking at tremendous salaries that it's just not doable in the federal services market.
So how do you counter that? I mean, you talked about ownership, but is this something you pipeline people out of college perhaps to do, or is it the stock incentives to get them away from larger companies? Or
yeah, so the ESOP helps, but it's really about building those pipelines with universities or technical schools, right? So you're exactly right. You have to build that pipeline, but at the same time, you have to have an overarching brand, right, that people are going to believe into. And that's the social media, that's your executive leadership, that's your middle management. It's all of those people that understand the mission and the transparency. You know, we're under 200 employees. So, right, I mean, I could have a conversation with any of my employees. It's very difficult for big businesses to do that, right? Or even mid-sized businesses in our industry. So it's a little bit easier for us, but you know, I think recruiting is going to continue to be a problem, I think, in our industry for a little while, especially with the projected growth in North Alabama. All the investments that's coming in and the different clearances that you're going to have, TS, SCI, full scope poly. We don't have that in Huntsville.
Right.
So that workforce is going to have to come from somewhere else, and you're going to have to eat cost to get that workforce here. And either your customer understands it or you eat the cost and make the investment as an employer.
Right.
And there's risk involved with that. So, you know, I'm not exactly sure. And I'm not going to give you all my secret sauce.
Yeah, there may be some competitors listening out there. But so I guess, you know, just personally, taking into account what you're doing at Ignite, you know, what would you say is one of the things you're most proud of, and then one of the things that you may want another stab at?
You know, the proudest thing, well, you mentioned this. I sold USI to Ignite 6 years ago. And then 2.5 years ago, I bought out my buddy Jason, who was the CEO and unfortunately had some health problems. And I was able to give him a proper exit to his family. I enjoy the culture building. I enjoy challenging the team. I think last week, almost everybody in my executive team was mad at me, 100%. And various different reasons, right? But I'm pushing them. I have to push them. That's my job, right? I have to sharpshoot. And you do it in a professional manner, right? You don't do it disrespectfully. But, you know, sometimes it's hard to not be emotional and take things that way. But I enjoy that. I enjoy being able to have a difficult conversation with a teammate, how we completely disagree. And then the next week we're fine, right? We move on. I think if you can have that in your organization, that is a healthy organization. You have healthy dissent, healthy disagreement. You're going to have, you know, alphas or whatever you want to call it. You're going to have highly disagreeable people. They believe in what they're saying, right? And I truly enjoy that culture building. I enjoy teammates that they want to talk to each other. They want to be around each other. They don't hide from each other. I think like all entrepreneurs, things that I would take back and a different stab at, I think, you know, there's not trusting your gut. I have not trusted my gut once and had an employee try to extort me years ago. And, you know, this individual now lives in the middle of Florida. I don't live anywhere near here, okay? But at first, I didn't understand what was happening to me, and there's red flags. You know, this person comes from a different background. You know, they have this education, they have this experience. You don't want to disrespect them, but I had this feeling. I was like, some of these things aren't adding up, right? And then even when this individual tried to extort me, you're going to give me this, or you're not going to get this from a customer. I was like, that didn't make any sense, and I called an advisor. I was like, he said this on a Friday afternoon. And then I went to dinner with him and some guys were trying to recruit, and I paid for everybody. And my advisor was like, that's extortion. You're not going to get what you've been paying him to do unless you don't give him this. And I was like, well,
kind of dangling a carrot.
It never dawned on me because I don't operate that way. If I tell you this is a water bottle, it's a water bottle and it's $1. I mean, my truthfulness potentially maybe could offend people, and I get that, right? But I haven't trusted my gut on a couple of occasions, and I think every time it turned out the way I thought it would eventually. And so, you know, as an entrepreneur, sometimes you just have to trust your gut. My CFO has a really hard time with this sometimes because when you're budgeting,
very analytical, right?
It's analytical, right? They're accountants, right? So you're analytical. It's ones and zeros, black and white. And you want me to tell you that something's a guarantee. I have mitigated risk to the nth degree as best I can. This is the decision I'm making. I still can't guarantee that we'll make $1 billion next year.
Sure.
I'm telling you, I've mitigated all risk. I've done all capture. I've done all shaping. We've done everything we could do to secure this. And guess what? the customer still gets a vote, and you still might lose, right? Somebody may have outworked you. They may have had a better solution. But not trusting my gut, that's something I will always do now, because I've learned that we know what we're doing, and we'll talk through all the issues. But if you're an entrepreneur, you're going to take risks, but you got to trust your gut sometimes, and you got to roll with it. Yeah,
no, that's fantastic advice. And if you are talking about making $1 billion next year, I'm sure there's going to be some people calling you about job opportunities here soon. So everybody's stay tuned for Ignite. But so you mentioned how you're disagreeable among your executives or even just your employees. You're open to disagreements. It helps create a better company in your idea. How can you recommend to maybe other entrepreneurs, other organizations, on how they can create that culture?
So first and foremost, I'm a believer culture starts at the top, right? Culture starts with me as the CEO. You can't have middle managers creating culture and the CEO is off doing whatever that's not enforcing culture. It doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't work that way. And so, at the top of the pyramid is the manager, CEO, whatever, and they set the culture. A standard of excellence is, and the only way to create a standard of excellence inside of a culture is to remove all emotion from decision making, and you're looking at a fair playing field, right? There are people that build personal relationships with their employees. I think I have great personal relationships with my employees. They know that I will never allow that personal relationship to affect my decision making. That's hard for some people to get, and some people don't want to be a part of that culture. Right. They don't, and they will naturally fall off, and that's fine. There's a standard of doing it the Ignite way, and I think the way you codify that is you put it in writing. You have a meeting. Our team did an offsite, and my employees came up with the Ignite way. I've got the card on me right here, and with our culture, it says right here, I'll read from it. I've actually shared this on LinkedIn, is we have an obligation to dissent. We will not be offended. We will not take it personal. Business focused, right? We accept the dissent can be rejected, right? So if you codify that with your employees and they understand that James is disagreeing with Clay because of the idea, right? You're disagreeing with how I'm trying to solve that problem. It's not a personal attack. And so if you codify that, and people will waver, they will, right? If you disagree with me, some people will have an emotional, it's human nature.
You're backed up in a corner.
You're backed up into a corner. It's human nature. When that happens, I, as the CEO or leader, whatever you want to call me, I will pull them aside and try to explain that. And sometimes they're still going to be pissed.
Sure.
Sometimes they're not going to get it. And then a week later, 2 weeks later, oh, okay, now I start understanding why they gave me that feedback. And culture takes time to build, right? People want to snap their fingers like, oh, Clay was the nicest guy. He bought everybody pizza one day. That's not culture, right? And the culture comes from that day in and day out grind of being respectful with each other. And that's, to me, you have to write it down and codify it. HR doesn't set culture. There's a lot of people that will disagree with me on this, but in our industry, all of my employees are out everywhere else.
Sure.
Right? And I told a person that was in HR one time, and they were doing all the right things, and I wasn't trying to disrespect them. And I said, you don't create culture. Well, I'm trying to help. And I said, you're doing wonderful. I said, you are not the program manager out at White Sands Missile Range with a government.
You're not who they're reporting to every day.
You don't have a GS-15 breathing down your back with a software coder trying to solve a problem for Army Futures Command. Our program manager is. And our program manager in the field is the one that is creating that culture because they're in the grind. They're in the dogfight. And if I'm not enforcing that down on the ground, right, with my program managers, that's where that culture gets broken. In our industry, and everybody knows this at Ignite, the program managers are the most important people. If you think you're a vice president, you're an executive, you're important, guess again with the Ignite way. You're not. You play a very valid point, but you're not in the knife fight. You're not in the trenches with the government customer trying to solve that problem. And so my team knows if we've got people in the field and they call somebody on corporate or admin or whatever you call us overhead, and they don't respond in a timely fashion, or they're disrespectful to our people in the field, you're done. This isn't like second chances. Our people in the field are the ones that are representing the company.
They're the warfighter.
They're the warfighter, right? And if you do not respond to them in a timely fashion, or if you're disrespectful to our guys and gals in the field, I'm done with you. There's not even a second chance, because if you were disrespectful once to them because you don't respect them as a person, what they're trying to do, I can't teach that.
Right.
I can try to reinforce it, right? But I really have a very short tolerance for disrespect of others in the company, and enforcing that overall standard of the people in the field are the warfighter. They are the one working with typically government customers. We have commercial customers as well, but they're responsible to the customer. And guess who's going to get their butt chewed? It ain't going to be you. It's going to be Mrs. So-and-so down on the ground at Johnson Space Center, and now she's getting her butt handed to her, and now she feels all alone. She's all alone. Nobody's there to support her.
Yeah.
Right? And if that's not the Ignite way, and it's not going to be tolerated. And I think you codify that culture, you set a standard of professional respect, and then you can have a disagreement. And the last thing I'll say, and I think I'm going to mess up the quote, but it was like Justice Scalia and Ginsburg from like the 90s, right? And I don't remember who said it, right? I think it was Scalia, but he said, I hate the idea, I don't hate the person. Right. And I think we live in a stupid world right now where
you conflate the two.
Right. We can disagree on tons of stuff. I don't hate you as a person. I just disagree with how you're going to solve the problem. And we're not even open as a society to have that conversation anymore because, oh, you're that way, so I can't even talk to you. Well, why not? Why wouldn't you talk to them and try to understand where they're coming from? Right.
They take away people's standing.
Yeah.
So, if you believe in that, well, then obviously you can't speak about this.
Yeah, obviously, which is silly. But I think if you are able to build that professional respect, right, and it starts at the top, you codify what your standards are, then everything else is gravy. I don't know.
Love it. Culture of dissent.
Yep.
Just you, Clayton Hinchman. I mean, it sounds like you got tons of stuff going on. What do you do for fun?
I raised 2 daughters that dance. That's what I do. No.
What do you do for fun, though?
No, for fun. I exercise daily. I think for myself, I'm a weightlifter. I was never big into running and all that, but that has always been my alone time, my peaceful time. And so for fun, I like to have a whiskey. I like to have a cigar. I like to travel. I travel with my family a lot. And really that's about trying to teach my daughter's perspective of the world. I never left small town Texas until I was 18, and the world was this big place. And so I'm trying to teach them perspective on how they, if we continue to be successful, what some people do and don't have, right? Trying to teach them. So I try to travel with my kids, make time for my family. And I think a really big important part is making time for yourself and your family, right? Everybody has to have alone time. You got to take time to yourself, and a lot of people take that in a lot of different ways. But mine's working out, having a drink, enjoying a good conversation with somebody. I mean, it's having a nice dinner. That's what I do to try to pace myself. And I'm big into time management. Right. I manage every day from 6 a.m. until about 8 at night. And I have to do that. And I put in breaks throughout my day. Some people try to go. And you can't, I've never seen that to be a sustainable model. You have to have built-in breaks in your day where you mentally
It seems like everything kind of bleeds together unless you take a break. I mean, you get up and walk around a little bit, something, No,
100%. I mean, it's too many, in my opinion, too many people try to do too much and then they never do anything really well. Right. So if you're trying to be an expert or good at everything, guess what? You're going to be good at nothing. Right. I mean, that's really, it's rare to find somebody who's really freaking good at everything. I've just never seen that work. And
I'm right here.
Oh yeah. Well, there's you, right? You're the anomaly, right? But people have to, and you've got to build in those breaks. You've got to build in that time, because if you don't, as a working professional, we all know this, every day, like it's 5:00 and you did not get anything accomplished, what you wanted to do. And you're like, well, now I got to work Saturday. Yeah. Now I got to work Saturday. Now I got to work Sunday. Now I got to work Sunday night. Right. And that's not fair to your spouse or your loved ones or your family. So you've got to plan that out. And you really got to learn to unplug.
Well, you raised a good point. I know we're trying to wrap up here shortly, but do you feel like we live in a much more distracted age than the generation we grew up in? I think that's very obvious, but what are some keys that you think of maybe to get undistracted?
I don't have social media. I don't have Facebook. I don't have Instagram. I don't have the TikToks.
And you're alive?
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm still alive. I use LinkedIn purely from a social media standpoint, right? I know people share jobs and things like that, and I think it's a great tool. But I don't inject any of that ridiculous negativity, which is all you find on social media, in my opinion, or realistic. You can have abs with 6 minutes. It's ridiculous, right? Or you can look this way. It's all nonsense. It's all fake, right? And I think there's studies that prove how all of that stuff is not good for your brain and your mental health and your mental function.
Right.
I've completely unplugged, right? And I argue with my wife and others that I'm like, just unplug from that garbage because it's not.
And you'll feel better.
It's not good for you. It's not, it creates unrealistic goals. And the biggest thing that I've noticed, and probably some influencer who's going to attack me for, right? Because I don't know anything.
You won't know about it.
Right. Well, they've been able to monetize it. Right. And I think that's a wonderful thing. If that's how they can earn a living, that's fantastic. There's a market and they can make money doing that. That's smart. As an entrepreneur, that's what you're going to do. But in my industry and for my life, it doesn't have a positive impact. Right. And so, I've got 2 little girls that are 7 and 10. I don't want them seeing unrealistic, crazy stuff on social media all the time when we've got a great life.
Sure.
Right. I've had my daughters tell me before, my 10-year-old told me this last week. She's like, Daddy, I feel sorry for you. And like my kids, both of them did not realize I was an amputee till they were 4. Both of them. Cognitive skills kicked in. And when they hit 4 at their various ages. And my oldest told me last weekend, Mommy was out of town and watching the girls. And she says, hey, I feel sorry for you. And I'm like, baby, don't ever feel sorry for me. I got a great life. I got a great family. I got great kids. I'm having so much.
As long as you behave.
Yeah, right. I'm having so much fun. And I said, the fact that I walk with a limp, that didn't bother me at all, right? Because unfortunately, I know people who are way worse off than me, right? And I know people who are better off than me, and they're still not as happy as me, right? Because you have the ability to affect your own life. And looking at what everybody else has, to me, has never been a positive impact, right? So I'm trying to teach that to my kids. I'm probably a failure in that, but I'm trying my best.
I think that's great advice. I think you gave plenty of great advice for people listening in on this conversation. And just thank you for what you and your company do in this community, and thank you for your service.
No, thanks, James. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Thank you for listening to this episode of Uncommon Access. Our podcast is produced by Redstone Gateway, where the future works. You can find Uncommon Access on major podcast platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Play. You can find out more about Uncommon Access on redstonegateway.com/podcast.